Today, let us take some time to study the words of God together with the sermon titled, The Ones That Resemble Christ the Most. If we were to summarize the life of Christ in one sentence, we could say that everything he did was driven by his desire to save mankind. Jesus was crucified. He came down to this earth, putting on the humble clothes of flesh, confining himself to the parameters of time and space. He was in a position even lower than the angels. We need to realize that all of this came from his unceasing desire to free his heavenly children from their sins and to lead them back to the eternal kingdom of heaven. Who then are the ones that resemble Christ the most? Another way to pose this question is, who has made the greatest effort to lead our Zion family members on the correct path to the kingdom of heaven? To save us sinners, Christ left his glorious throne behind in heaven and came down to this earth wearing the tent of flesh. When he came to earth, he was not born in a royal family with nobility. Rather, he came from a meek and humble family. He was born in Galilee, a town regarded by the Israelites as a place where uneducated and economically disadvantaged people lived. They were people without any influence or status in society. It was this kind of environment that Jesus Christ came from. Nevertheless, the environment did not obscure God's will. Jesus Christ's only focus was, how can I save all my lost children and lead them to the correct path to receive the eternal salvation of heaven? This is the greatest factor in why Christ came down to earth, and the main reason why New Jerusalem, our Heavenly Mother, has come down to earth. By ruminating on the life of Christ, we should reflect on ourselves by thinking, who can say that they live their life of faith resembling Christ the most? Don't you think that those family members of Zion who resemble God the most can easily enter the kingdom of heaven? To them, the angels at the gates of heaven wouldn't question them by saying, "Can I see your ID?" Rather, they would easily recognize who they are and say to them, "You may come right in." Let's take a look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 14 together. May I never boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. Neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything. What counts is a new creation. Peace and mercy to all who follow this rule, even to the Israel of God. Finally, let no one cause me trouble, for I bear on my body, whose mark do we have? The marks of Jesus. In other words, Apostle Paul testified, from now on, let no one cause me any trouble, because I bear the marks of Christ. He followed the exact same footprints set forth by Christ. He put into practice the mindset of Christ by treating each soul that he encountered just as Jesus would have treated them, whether they were from Europe, Asia, or any other place that he went to. Isn't this the reason why he was able to confidently boast, "Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness"? Apostle Paul said, "I bear the marks of Christ always." Let us see about the marks of Christ by opening to the book of Isaiah and reading from chapter 53. Chapter 53, verse 1. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. In order to save all mankind, Christ had to fulfill the condition of coming with the tent of flesh. It was only through these conditions that he was able to come to earth. He had no beauty or majesty, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Even as far back as 700 years, the prophets prophesied about his humble and lowly appearance and how he would fulfill all that was prophesied about him.
예언을 하셨고 예언하신 이대로의 모습을 가지고 이 땅에 오셨다고 했습니다.
God chose the path where he would come with an appearance that no one would desire. He chose to forego any beauty in this world only so that he could save his children. Let us continue by reading verse 3. He was despised and rejected by men. When someone despises us even a little, we regard it as something big. However, no human could ever endure the kind of spite and malice that was bestowed upon Christ. When our expectations and desires are not fulfilled, even in the smallest matter, we may feel as though we are going through a big test. However, it is incomparable to the life of Christ, who was constantly hated by those around him, and who was forced into circumstances that anyone would despise. The number of hardships and suffering he endured was countless. Yet, he was consoled only by the thought, how can I lead my children to salvation? Usually people who undergo many tests are those who have a self-centered faith. Then, who is not constantly being tested? It is those who have a mind just like that of Christ. Those people's faith is not easily tested. While doing the gospel, we must undergo thousands of different experiences and go through many situations until the time that we enter heaven. Yet, if we are continually being tested, we will be drained of all our energy on our way to the kingdom of heaven. Then what should we do? We must learn to have the mind of Christ. We must resemble him. It was written in the scriptures that Christ must go through many hardships. He must experience great suffering. He accepted these conditions and came down to earth to save us. It was a condition that was offered to him 700 years ago. When he was asked, "Are you willing to go down to earth even under these conditions?" his response was, "I am willing." What was the reason? He chose such a path for the salvation of his children. We must resemble Christ. In order for us to resemble Christ, we must save all our lost brothers and sisters and lead them to the eternal kingdom of heaven. We must always think, who are the ones that resemble Christ the most? We must make many efforts to spread the fragrance of Christ to each other and look after one another. By this, I'd like to conclude today's sermon. Thank you very much.